top out already. In Wale, I'm the best of my city. It ain't Wale. I've been to Brooklyn and back, still rocking my chain. I feel like Gilly in Philly, I feel like Pac in LA. My bitch is hitting in so many cars, I pop in the day. I make her wait for the tape, but I could drop it today. In Wale, my bitch got a love for ballin' like Sonale. In Wale, I should fly today, so I fly away.
Salute everybody.
If I die today, I hope I'm in Wale.
Back in NYC, I just live a lead. I just booked.
You already know the vibe, man. We just warming up. We just letting everything warm up. Salute to that. Salute to everybody. We got a lot to get into. We got Bmf Takedown, Big Meech, and Terry secrets, Southwest T, revealed by Prosecutor Rand Csehi. By Prosecutor Rand Csehi, and this is a crime and entertainment reaction. So salute to everybody in the building. You already know, everybody get y'all likes up. Y'all drop your likes, share the video, subscribe to the channel. I appreciate all of that. You already know. So let's just go into a breakdown of this video, and let's see exactly what because he's a former prosecutor. You know what I'm saying? He done had his own run-ins with the law himself, this guy, Rand. You know what I mean? But he was a Fulton County, he was a prosecutor. So we are going to get into this guy, Rand Csehi. So salute to everybody. Yeah, let's take a look. Let's just see what's going on.
Welcome back, everybody, to Crime and Entertainment. I got a very special guest with us today. Please welcome Rand Csehi. All right?
You're correct.
All right, that's good. Listen, man, me and you got contact. I reached out to you on Facebook because I've done a few shows concerning the cooperation, or maybe not so much cooperation, of Big Meech. And you were part of the original task force that actually took him down, him and his enterprise, when he was in Atlanta. So I reached out to you. You agreed to come on and do the show. First, thank you for coming here. But before we jump into the heart of it, man, I want to know, like, how did you even get into this line of work, kind of where you grew up, and then we'll work our way into that.
Sure. Thank you for having me. I always knew I wanted to be a lawyer. So I went to University of Georgia, graduated from UGA, and then on to Georgia State Law. And with a concentration, I tried to, once you take your core classes, took constitutional classes, criminal classes, and I've stayed in criminal law. Right out of law school, I was a defense attorney briefly. Then I became a prosecutor in a DUI trial court, or City of Atlanta, which was a had jury trial authority. We tried prosecuted DUIs. And then on my first assistant district attorney job was in Forsyth County, Georgia, a metro county above Atlanta, where I became a drug prosecutor. The state at the time they were phasing in. There was a 3-year phase in of drug prosecutors. They were supplementing the salaries of each DA's office to have somebody dedicated solely to prosecuting drug cases, indicting them, doing their asset forfeiture. We were still a year out at Forsyth, but nobody, I wanted to do the drug cases. Nobody else really wanted to. So it was a good fit. And I was allowed to work closely with the narcotics guys in Forsyth at the time. And we were quite successful. And so from there, started, I got to know DEA, ATF, officers from other agencies. I started to get invited to train officers in Fourth Amendment law, drug law, drug investigations, meth lab investigations. And then eventually I moved down to Fulton County in Atlanta, which is where I did the BMF case.
Okay. Now, there was a situation, you and I talked offline, so if you can't talk about it, that's fine. But you were able to find, like, where stuff had just been being held and sat, and we're talking seizures and money and stuff like that, where you was able to kind of delegate that to certain places to help out?
Well, sure. Well, in Forsyth County, when I first got to Forsyth County, and took over the drug cases, there was just one of the detectives had come to me and said, "Hey, we have all this evidence still in our evidence room that we've had for 20, 30, 40 years. What can we do about it?" And he said, "Here's a box with these forfeitures that were instituted, but there was no orders on them. So we started looking at them and realized that all this, that the statute had run, these had been years. Nobody had ever contested it. So we needed to dispose of it. And it amounted to quite, I believe it was almost $500,000.
It's a lot. We got a lot to get into as well, you know what I mean? Because when we dealing with BMF and all of this, it's a lot. I got paperwork on some stuff too, if we do want to get into some paperwork on some of these things too. You know, even though we know that these things is open and closed and shut already. But salute to everybody. I need everybody in the building to be hitting that poll. Let me know what y'all thinking. If you're following the Big Meech, the Cuffy Gatlins, the Tammy Cowens, any of these situations that's going on, there's been a lot of talk online, especially as of the last months, especially since 50 jumped into the fray. There's been a lot of conversations saying Big Meech snitch, even some people saying Cuffy snitch. It's a lot of talk like that. You know, we don't see in certain paperworks, we don't see none of that Cuffy snitching or Big Meech is snitching. We know that Big Meech is tied into Tammy Cowens, but we do know that Tammy was working for Meech in these different ways, had his life rights and all these other things as well. You know, so the question becomes, when did Meech know? Did he know? When did he know? And everybody's talking about this third-party cooperation situation, all right? So this is what the poll's about. This is what, if you've been on YouTube, you've been online, you've been hearing the fray, the this, the that. So just let me know what you're thinking about. Hit the poll. Do you think that Big Meech is told in any way? The poll will be changing. I'll be flipping that to Cuff or whoever else as well. Because, you know what I mean, this is what it is. We just unbiased here. So salute to everybody. And let's get back to the content.
And money that was still sitting in the sheriff's bank account for 20, 30 years. A lot, weapons and other items that could be auctioned off. So, you know, the county was happy. The sheriff was happy. My boss was happy. And it kind of just, like I said, it thrusted me into the asset forfeiture drug prosecutor role.
Yeah, you made a lot of friends real quick with that, I'm assuming.
On that side, at least, not so much the people whose property we took, but
yeah,
I guess after 20 years, we're still holding out hope that they were going to get their items back. There were some cool items in there. There was some pearl handled revolvers and a couple houses, and the cars were a little beat up by then. But
yeah, but where do they store that? Where do they store cars?
Up at the site, they would store at one of the three tow yards.
Okay, yeah. So they would just take them to a tow yard.
Correct, and they had a deal with them where they just cover them and they just sat there. The forfeited vehicles, once we got them, were either put into service or sold.
Okay, so the BMF case starts to take shape. Correct me if I'm wrong, but Jack Harvey is on this for a while before anybody really wants to pick up and roll with him on it.
Correct. Special Agent Jack Harvey of the DEA. He was a one-man band, and he led the charge. And then shortly thereafter, APD investigator Bryant Burns. They worked very closely together, and I was very close with Bryant and with Jack. I saw Bryant more than I did see Jack, and Jack would lobby me. Bryant would lobby me. They were doing work. They did a lot of great work, and eventually we used it. But in the beginning, again, as I've said before, there was just this resistance. We have a black music label. We have Innuendo. We have in St. Louis, in LA, Georgia. But there's no, just because somebody says hello to these guys doesn't make them part of an enterprise. Right. And that's, what the feds would call a continuing criminal enterprise.
Yeah, RICO, yeah.
Right. So it's just, it was not enough for me. And plus, keep in mind, I had my own caseload at the time. I had other responsibilities, knowing that once I devoted to something to this, or any of my energy to this, that I was gonna, it was a one-shot deal. If I swung at this and I missed, it was going to be a disaster. Yeah. And plus, if we were wrong, we're going to ruin good people's reputations. So I was resistant.
Do you know when Meech first got on his radar? Because Meech operated out of Detroit for a period of time. From what I understand, he got shot at. I don't know if he got hit, but he got shot at. And all things considered, Meech wasn't necessarily a go-to violence type of guy to handle situations, at least not at that point. And then he left there from the BMF series that's on Stars, went to LA, made some connections, and then transitioned back to Atlanta. Do you know when he became on Harvey's radar?
I don't remember. Jack and I we were trying to flesh this out a few weeks ago. I think Jack was of the opinion it was around the time that there was a murder of Ulysses Hackett and Misty Carter.
Yes.
Misty Carter was an innocent victim. She was dating this Ulysses Hackett when their home was invaded in the middle of the night, and they were both murdered in their bed. And so it was a little bit before that. We couldn't really figure out. I know that the IRS was already onto them.
Right.
And I believe hooked up with Jack when Jack caught wind of it, and they have their database, and you put the names in, you see what matches up. Mm-hmm. So, I think it was Scartozzi, the IRS agents. They had been working on it. Jack and I disagree on when he first brought it to me. I thought I said no for a couple of years, but he was of the opinion that I never said no. So,
well, we'll circle back to that later because the shooter and that victim was connected to someone of high importance in Atlanta, and we'll get back to that. So when did he finally convince you to come on to this? Because like you said, you had your own caseload. This is going to be a big commitment. So at what time did that happen?
We started in July of 2004. Okay. We started laying the framework for it. We were laying the framework for a wiretap investigation with the belief or the hope that it would lead us to a BMF case. But Jack was of the opinion. Jack had this opinion that any drug transaction was 2 degrees separated from a BMF person, BMF supply.
Right.
And so it was going to put that to the test.
And that's not far-fetched. I mean, because to be honest, their reach, I mean, it went through states and states. I mean, St. Louis, had people in Florida, Detroit, all the way up to L.A., where his brother was kind of running shop up there for the transpo. And, I mean, that's a lot of people. And you would think that especially nowadays maybe it's a little bit more prevalent for people to cooperate. And I'm sure it was then too. But for them to have the run that they did, it was still impressive that nobody flipped.
Oh, it was very impressive. I mean, they were, their motto was BMF for life, and they did not snitch on each other in the beginning.
Yeah,
Jack was right. There was 2 degrees of separation. There was some guys who came in out of Tennessee to go back to Tennessee. They were 2 degrees separated from BMF. So yeah, he was right. They were prevalent. They were controlling the city. At least in Atlanta, they were controlling the drug flow.
Mm-hmm. And by and large, the whole city was profiting because they would go to the strip clubs like Magic City. And I mean, you see it in the documentary. And I know you said you don't watch a lot of the documentaries, even though you're in them and a part of them. But they are just showering those places with money.
Sure. And they're showering with a lot of counterfeit money.
Yeah.
But still, any publicity is good publicity.
Correct.
For the clubs, they not necessarily for a criminal enterprise,
right?
But when they went out and they had a large following, people were hanging on. And in any situation, when you have that many people following you, you're going to have some trouble.
Yeah.
But they were controlling the clubs. And where they went, they made their presence known.
Mm-hmm.
But they had some Robin Hood moments, throwing money out of a helicopter, to the folks in the old 4th Ward. Meech had his birthday party, the Meech of the Jungle party, where he had, exotic animals.
He had animals walking down the street.
Yes, he did. And in case what
do you have out there? Elephants? Tigers?
I believe he had an elephant, a tiger, maybe a llama. I still, at the time, again, I know that there was quite a bit of displeasure. Jack was unhappy with it, but again, I was like, okay, so the guy threw a party for himself, okay, a bit over the top, a bit extra, but he certainly got our attention.
Yeah, I think if I'm not mistaken, that was right after he had beat the double murder case.
Right, or the Club Chaos.
Chaos. Club Chaos case.
It wasn't that he beat it.
They dropped the charges.
Yeah, they dropped it pretty quickly on him. That was that was not a good case.
Yeah,
I think everybody agreed that was justifiable.
So whenever they're getting this thing going, like you said, they're taking over clubs. They got shirts that say BMF. They're wearing rags, everything else. They're turning what essentially was a drug organization or drug empire into a brand name, which isn't necessarily the smartest move, but the way he was doing it was trying to make it a record label. And so he was trying to push young artists. One of them was Blue Da Vinci. And I think we're past the 10-minute mark now. Give me your opinion on Blue Da Vinci.
Well, speaking of pushing young artists, he should have just pushed them in front of a fucking train. So in the midst of our investigation, when we started firing up, they had I believe it was the Source Awards, and Blue Da Vinci won the best album of the year.
No way.
I can't remember. He won something. I mean, so and it was like, you got to be kidding me. I mean, maybe he could win the best blowjob of the year, but he was if you ever listen to the guy, somebody played his CD in the task force office, and I threw the CD player away. It just could not be salvaged.
He going hammer on this nigga. He said, "Yo, this shit is yo, son. That's crazy. Yo, Blue, you gotta shoot the hands with this nigga right here, man. Rand Csehi, whatever his name, Csehy. You need the hands and feet, Blue. Hands and feet. This nigga just wild on you, bro. This nigga just wild on you. Salute to everybody in the building. You already know the vibe. Make sure everybody's hitting that poll. Everybody's dropping a like. Welcome to On Go. Make sure you subscribe. Be a part of the channel. Let's get back to it.
It's just, there's no doubt. And BMF paid off the judges for him to win the award. And again, it was just I've said it before, this hubris, that like we're untouchable. And just Blue Da Vinci is just the word. He's just terrible. I mean, if he came out with a country album, I don't even think they could pay them to give him an award.
Like they did Beyonce.
Right. But he was back, and it's just, and then, so, but yeah, his music just sounds like, if you can imagine a chipmunk like on a chalkboard being molested by a Great Dane. That's what Blue Da Vinci is. I cannot say enough about how much I do not enjoy Blue Da Vinci.
What about Jacob the jeweler was tied into this?
He did their jewelry.
So he did all their jewelry. And was his part of it more like a money laundering aspect? Because all the rappers, if you remember back in those days, Ja Rule, everybody was talking about Jacob the jeweler.
Sure.
That he would be the first to see Jacob. I mean, he was supplying all the, the rappers with the diamonds. What was his role with BMF?
He made some of their pieces. I remember, my position on that was he was not in Atlanta.
Right.
I didn't want to deal with it. It was, he got paid drug money, laundered money. So, tell me somebody who owns a legitimate business who hasn't received laundered money without them know. It's not enough that you suspect that they're drug dealers. If they want to act like drug dealers, So I think they ended up indicting him for something.
He did. He got a couple of years. I don't remember exactly what it was. I was just curious if it became to a certain point where it was knowingly money laundering, because like you said, how many businesses probably take drug profits? They might know, they maybe not know, but I mean, like car stereo places.
Sure.
You think guys aren't coming in there dumping $15,000 in a stereo system? They didn't just save that up in a piggy bank. Right.
And sure. And I think that's how they did get him, because he was receiving cash to make these items. And again, too, I said, I defended it, but in the end, of course he knew.
Yeah.
Of course you do. When you're getting large cash payments that are above and beyond the actual value of the items that are being made. But yeah,
maybe that's where it would come in.
Yeah.
If you're charging $10,000 for a diamond, but you're getting $20,000 in cash, then you're a little bit more complicit. You can't really hold that I didn't know card.
Sure, and
hit that poll and drop a like, y'all.
He made, and I saw a few of them. They weren't great quality diamonds, but for some kid who's never had anything, and then he can have a diamond encrusted BMF, or Blue Da Vinci can have a diamond.
But that's interesting though, how they had all that. They tried to turn this thing into a music brand. Which in actuality is not a horrible idea, you know, because then you're able to account for some of this money coming in. And a lot of times there's a buddy that Matt and I know named Pete, and he even said that a lot of times drug proceeds were washed through the music industry because you would put a lot of money behind this artist. You know, you would buy umpteen CDs that you would sell, and even if they didn't sell, you're going to say they sold because you were selling them at swap meets and flea markets. And if they didn't sell, you just throw them over a damn bridge. And, you know, if they blow up and become something, great, then you have legitimate money. If they don't, then you can write off all this stuff up. We tried this, studio time, whatever, you're writing off money, and it's going to help you on your tax. So there's a lot of good things that can come out of it. When I say good, I mean beneficial to what they're doing. Of course. You know, beneficial to what they're doing. So that wasn't the craziest idea, but the putting up of the billboards, to me, I mean, and Meech even says this in the phone conversation. She's like, you know, I wasn't trying to rub it in their face, but what do you think it was going to do?
Right. You know, I remember the day it went up. You know, I was driving to work, and I almost drove up on the curb, and I say, you know, I remember thinking to myself, and I told Jack this, was that Harvey's going to be in my office. I already knew that I was going to get a visit from Jack that day, and sure enough, he was pissed about the billboard. My boss, the district attorney, was pissed about the billboard. You know, everybody's like, "Oh, have you seen that billboard?" Because at this point, it was well known. I did not want to do this case. Yeah. I just did not feel it was enough. You know, and then too, my position was, well, okay, they're black mafia entertainment. They're acting like they're a bunch of bosses. You know, they're wearing suits. He has a cigar with his feet up on the desk, and there's an old white guy who happens to be the mayor of Miami in the billboard. But okay, you know, that was odd. But again, what were we going to do about it? It was it didn't, in my mind, it didn't prove criminal enterprise. Right. Of course, we were still trying to work that angle, or the investigators were. And after Blue Da Vinci won that award, and you heard him, it was clear they were not going to make any money from him. Right. And then the rumors about the bribes. So we started getting more and more, it started looking more and more like a front. Because certainly nobody in their right mind could have thought that Blue Da Vinci was going to carry that enterprise. Right. I think everybody agrees with me on that.
Why did you think it was going to be difficult to tie Meech to this?
Simply because I didn't know who Meech knew. You know, again, I have a man who's the head of a record label. Now, say he's a record label head, and there are people who may know Blue Da Vinci. Their only artist was Blue Da Vinci, right? So these people may have been seen hanging out with Blue Da Vinci. But does that mean that Meech has ordered them or authorized them to act on his behalf to sell drugs? There was no connection. His inner circle was insulated. Right. Now, we knew who his brother was. We knew who they were. But we were unable. Nobody was going to flip. We had tried. They tried in St. Louis. They tried in Detroit. We tried traffic stops. Nobody was talking. We could not get close to Meech, which worked to our advantage in the end, because a wiretap is a last resort, that you have tried and exhausted all other investigative techniques. Mm-hmm. So
you start these wiretaps, and that's what, on their phones?
Yes, sir. That's on. We start off on one phone. Young man by the name of Raphael Allison. They called him Smurf. He was just a low-level, street-level dime slinger, and he would go to the bus stops in the morning, these 12, 13-year-old girls, and grab them before they got on the bus and get their nails done, get their hair done, and have sex with them. And it was causing quite a stir in the community. And so one of our investigators brought it to us and thought it might be a good opportunity to at least try. He knew that our boss wanted to do the wiretaps. And again, under this premise, the 2 degrees of separation, we said, okay, we'll try it. We'll do it. And it was a good case because, again, nobody was talking. We had no other way to get this guy Smurf. So a wiretap was a good technique. And if it failed, we weren't out too much. Right. So that's what we went. We went up on Smurf. And,
can we talk about how that happened?
Yeah. So we went up on Smurf initially, and I said, he was a mumbler. He's like, this is how it was. The first 90 calls, 3 seconds, and our agents would just bang your heads. Like we would slow it down, and we'd never understood what he said. And then we started deciphering some of his gibberish. But in the midst of all this, this guy, this is how ratchet he is. He gets mugged in broad daylight. Right? This jump out crew, they jump out on him, they steal his phone, and they steal his drugs. Right? Like he's on the phone, and you hear this robbery going down, and then they drive away. Right? So. And then I think he calls his mother or he uses somebody else's phone that we were up on and just to tell him what happened or somebody's relaying this story. And so we're sitting there thinking, what do we do now? Like, he don't have the money. They just robbed him of his money, his drugs, his phone. So we tracked down that phone. We tracked down the guy who steals Smurf's phone. And he's a couple blocks over. We roll up on him. Our agents, masks on, take him down, pat him down, grab his phone, and gone. So now the problem is, how do we get the phone back to Smurf, right? So somebody says, we just roll up on him and throw it at him, see what happens. Well, okay, it's like all this time, like we won't know how to get another phone number on him. So that's what these knuckleheads do. So we decide, well, we have no other choice. So the same jump out van, same jump out guys, they run at him. Smurf's standing there, they throw the phone at him, it hits them, and they jump in the car and they leave. Now, 10 seconds later, he's calling by, yeah, man, I got my phone back. They're afraid of me. They came and brought it back to me. He said, sorry. And never questions, what the hell was that? Like anybody else in their right mind would think, it's a little fishy, right? And so months later, when we're debriefing some of the other defendants, one of the guys says, if he had told me that, I really wish he would have told me that. He goes, I probably would not have bought the kilos from it or brought him all those drugs. We're like, yeah, like really not the smart. And he never questioned it. Even when we indicted him and we saw him in court, I had to tell. It was just one of those moments I had to explain to him. And he's like, no, man, I got it myself. I'm like, no, you didn't. It's just he was fried. It was one moment of levity in that case, but he was a knucklehead.
Is it true that you guys were listening to these wiretaps when you started getting more of them? And around the same time, there's a famous TV show called The Wire. And they're doing almost essentially what BMF is doing. And they're talking in the show about how to beat wiretaps by getting rid of phones and only keeping them a certain amount of time and not doing certain things in text messages. Y'all are hearing them talking about The Wire and how they're beating the system?
We were. The guys above Smurf, DeCarlo Hoskins and his crew, and I think The Wire would come out on a Sunday night back then.
Yeah. And
so this was a Monday night. They were recapping it. And DeCarlo and one of his buddies, they were talking about it. And the episode that night before had been where they suspected there was wiretaps, and the ringleader, they'd gotten all the phones together, and they had just been trading out SIM cards, but this time they smashed all of them because they realized that the IMEI numbers could still be traced. And we were sitting there, we're white knuckling it. And we'd even spoken about it that morning, been like, gosh, I hope these idiots aren't watching it. And sure enough, they're recapping it. And they're like, man, good thing these guys aren't smart enough to do this. Nobody's ever done one of those. And a bunch of hicks, blah, 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 blah. And they're like, well, we should change our numbers. Oh yeah, I got my new number here. Here's all y'all's new numbers. So they go, we're going to turn these phones off, but here's the new numbers. So the minute they turned them off, we were up on the other ones. Yeah. And again, when we took DeCarlo down, he was just matter of fact about it. He was like, man, he goes, I knew I should. We're like, you were watching The Wire. He goes, I know. I don't know why I didn't. And we're like, we don't either. I mean, so there's two instances where we could have been foiled immediately. Yeah.
Is it true? And I had a mob guy tell me this. He said he would change phones every 30 days because it took a month to get a wiretap on a phone. Is that true?
Maybe, well, yeah. So no, I would say it's not true. But it also depends on what year that was.
This would have been probably earlier on, maybe I say earlier on, maybe 80s, 90s.
Technology was a lot different then because, on the wiretap affidavits and applications, you have to explain how the whole process works. Okay. And so it still has a lot of that old language where it talks about the loop and the POTS, what's called a POTS line, POTS, which stands for plain old telephone system.
Right.
Which we don't use anymore, obviously, because we're on digital 5G, but it still tracks all that language. But just drafting it, and again, the feds, it does take that long, It has and always will. We got to
This would have been the feds for him, though.
Okay, so the feds. So yeah, it depends which office as well. As far as I was concerned, no, I would be able to, once we got a new number or a phone dropped, I was back up within the day, and we had worked it out with the telephone companies that they knew we weren't going to dance with them every time. We were going to send it to them, and we were going to be back up on it.
Okay. One of the first big kind of chinks in their armor is from a guy named Doc Marshall. Tell us how that went down, the ramifications of that, and he was kind of the guy, if I'm not mistaken, that was in charge of putting the vehicles in these guys' names.
That's correct. He was their finance. Doc Marshall was their finance guy, if you will. He had a place over off Angier, I think it was Angier Court in the old Fourth Ward. And one night, I got a call from Brian Burns, who got a call from dispatch. There was a home invasion and self-defense and killing in self-defense. The home invaders were killed in self-defense. Because when the police rolled up, Doc Marshall and his buddy Dave were there. I think they were walking Dave downstairs to the basement where there was a vault, literally a vault, to steal their drugs and or money. And Doc was waiting for them in the vault. So when they turned the corner, he blew them away. And when the police arrived, obviously they complied. They told the cops, hey, it's self-defense. And the cops were like, yeah, it was self-defense, but you left I think it was 11 kilos just sitting right there in the vault. So,
and they can maybe sticking that in the yard.
Right, or just maybe, I don't know, putting a plant over it, maybe a nice shawl, I don't know, a book, anything, So I don't know. They obviously had moved other kilos. The thought was that there had been a hell of a lot more there that got moved out, and that the police arrived too quick. And so when the time came for his bond hearing, we'd spoken. Obviously, I knew who everybody thought he was. They said he was BMF. There was no confirmation of it. And before we could get started, his attorney made a comment. He wanted to exclude any reference that I would make. This is just a bond hearing, mind you, that he was a member of BMF or that BMF even existed, or that he was tied to somehow or a conspirator with BMF and he was a businessman. And I looked at the judge and I said, we never said a thing about BMF. You just revealed its existence. Yeah. And from there, we spoke with him and he cooperated. The feds picked him up and worked him pretty good.
And these vehicles that they were getting, they weren't just your average limousines, vehicles. They were like some high-tech shit. And some of those interviews, I think that guy said he was like, you had to have the temperature on 72 degrees. You had to have the gear shifter in neutral. You had to press up on one window, down on another window, and then another button. The seat had to be all the way back. I mean, just like 8 or 9 different things for panels to open up. This shit was crazy.
It was quite intricate, I guess. Yeah. I knew one of the guys who actually did trick those out for them. And they never did one the same. And if you didn't know the code, you didn't know how to do windshield wipers, music up to this volume, this thing. It was virtually impossible, and you couldn't figure out where it was. So they had these vehicles, and plus they had a whole fleet of Dodge Magnums at the time. Everybody was driving a Magnum, which makes it quite difficult to follow when you have 16 in a row and they all decide to break off. Yeah, it was smart.
And I think, and I don't want to jump too far ahead, but after everything went down, wasn't there a situation where an individual got a hold of a Hummer or something that wound up having a substantial amount of cash in it?
Yeah, so this is one where it's well known how I feel about the FBI on this one. So after we executed all of our warrants, we seized a Hummer limousine, and while we were there, we knew there was money in it. We'd already been told there was money in it. It was the Hummer that we'd been looking for, and we couldn't figure out where it was. So somebody had the bright idea, hey, we'll give it to the FBI, a forensic auto squad. And they searched it, and a couple days later, I get the phone call, sorry, the best agent, at doing this, he couldn't find it. He says, there's no money in that vehicle. They auctioned it off, and sure enough, this older man who bought it, in about 5 minutes, he managed to flip the switch, and the ceiling opens up, and $1 million plus falls out.
Jesus.
So yeah, and again, thank you, FBI.
What's your acronym for them?
Well, the famous but incompetent,
famous but incompetent,
or the fumbling, bumbling idiots.
And that guy turned it in.
He called the feds, and they took it. He got a finder's fee. And I know, a lot of people laugh about that, but, perhaps he was thinking that he was getting set up, or perhaps he just didn't want the trouble. It's better to ask permission than forgiveness in this situation when dealing with the federal government.
I would think $1 million could get me out of a lot of trouble. I could stay out of trouble if I had $1 million.
Well, yeah, unless they take that $1 million also.
In the very least, I'm going to call and say, hey, I just bought this car and $500,000 just fell out of the damn sunroof.
And that's exactly
I don't know what's going on here.
But,
and that way I'm going to cause problems with somebody else because they'd say, well, we left $1 million in there. Well, look, $500,000 fell out. I don't know what happened.
But, too, maybe it was maybe he's one of those where it's, his conscience got the best of him.
Yeah, I'm sure that would have happened to me a lot later after everything that happened.
It wouldn't happen to me at all.
Yeah. Well, me neither. I was trying to at least give me some bit of good that when in my 80s I'd have thought about it. So that was the first domino to fall. Then the Club Chaos shooting. You've got Anthony Wolf Jones, and I forgot that other guy's name. His last name was Gertie. They go to Club Chaos. Meech is in there with a girl that I guess is with or was with Jones at one time. I guess they have words in the club. It gets heated in the club. Then they go outside. As they go outside, they're posted up on BMF's cars outside. And then all hell breaks loose.
Sure.
What is your...
this is one where I've said, sometimes there's just some people who need killing. And Wolf Jones, he picked a fight, he picked a fight with the wrong people.
Yeah.
There was always the backdrop to that too is, Wolf was, he was one of, I can't think of it, BIG's bodyguards.
Right. Or Puffy's, but yeah,
Puffy. But he was supposed to be there the night that Biggie was killed.
Yeah.
So there was
a deal was there in his place.
And so there's always there was this attention. There were some allegations that there was words about that. But again, they should have just walked away. They waited. They laid in wait for them. And Meech and his one of his guys, Amin Height, who go by the name Bull, just got the drop on him. It was the clearest case of self-defense.
But they really tried to hang it on him with the double murder. He was in custody for a while, couldn't leave. I think there was a point in time where he was even being streamed live to the clubs that he used to go to because he couldn't leave his house.
That was, I believe that was. We didn't want, that was in Fulton County, the homicides, the murders, they ran their course.
Right.
We had nothing to do with it. That was the murder unit running their course, and then the case was eventually dismissed.
So in that case, though, y'all kind of probably wanted them to hurry up and dismiss this shit because if he's now even further removed from the action on the street, it's going to make y'all's job a little bit harder. So you're probably trying to say, look, get rid of this shit. We're fixing to get him on a whole lot more, and you ain't even going to win this.
Well, maybe they were. I mean, I was all for. I mean, I didn't care. Again, I didn't want to do this case, so it was before my case. So if they took him off my plate, it was just one. It was just another thing I didn't have to deal with. I just, again, up until the last minute, I was not in on this case.
Right.
I was reluctant. At the end of the day, though, Jack was my friend.
Yeah.
And I had a boss tell me what to do also. And I wasn't going to let somebody else do it.
Right.
It was all, I was arrogant enough to believe and to know that I was the only one who was able to do it with these guys. Because these guys, Jack and those guys, they're not going to work with just anybody. I mean, I've been working with them for years on other cases. There was a rapport. And again, if you're not familiar with how, the language and how they act and how they talk and what they think, you're just going to hit a brick wall.
Yeah.
We see when he keeps making reference to Jack, we know that he's talking about Agent Jack Harvey. Jack Harvey, who took down BMF, as well was in part of taking down T. Stuckey, as well as many other people. Jack Harvey is the agent who handed Tammy Cowens off to Keith Cromer, where she ended up working with Keith to take down Cuffy Gatlins, and that's how all of that went, right? So that's who Agent Jack Harvey is. He's very, very instrumental in all of these things that happened, so much so that he had to come and testify in the Cuffy Gatlin trial as well. Because remember, even though he didn't work hand-in-hand on the Cuffy case, he did give the confidential source that he was the leader of this confidential source, which was Tammy's Cowens, to Agent Keith Cromer, and then they ended up having this illustrious affair for 8 to 12 months. Agent Keith Cromer, he denied all of this ever happened, all denials. But on my channel, I've done all the reads, even the OIG report, which was separate from Cuffy Gatlin's case, because that report, that hearing, stemmed from Cuffy's case when everything was when it came blowing off the can. That not only was she having this affair with Keith, actually, she was also getting money that she wasn't even working for. They said at one point she got upwards of $212,000 of federal funds that she never gave up no actionable information. That's the information that they get to set up seizures, especially long-lasting investigations and stuff like that. She didn't give up really nothing for these certain things that she was receiving all this money. So not only that, Keith Cromer also told her to lie. So it's a lot. That's when we stem coming from BMF, and also coming into that, because you know when they do it with St. Louis, they call that St. Louis BMF. That's listed in the paperwork as St. Louis BMF. You can go through all of my paperwork, reads all of the things that's on my channel to understand exactly where we're at. Because I'm also going to be going into a lot more, because the other day I just bust that the DEA, the ex-DEA in Cuffy Gatlin and all of that in the BMF case. You know what I mean? I went into that and I prefaced some of it for us, you know what I'm saying? And then going through some of that, it led me down a whole nother rabbit, you know what I'm saying? It kind of led me down, you know what I mean, shit like this. You know what I mean? Quintaris Smith. This is another case that I want to get into. Quintaris Smith, right? From out there in the Eastern District of Missouri, as you can see, they said he was getting that bag. Not even a joke, he was getting that bag. You know what I'm saying? So much so, look, St. Louis drug distributor sentenced for dealing cocaine to forfeit over $1.1 million. You know what I'm saying? We go into that. You know what I mean? St. Louis, Missouri, Quintaris Smith, 38, of St. Louis, Missouri, was sentenced to 7 years imprisonment for his participation in a conspiracy to possess with the intent to distribute cocaine, and a fine of $25,000, and he was ordered to forfeit over $1.1 million in the sale of drug proceeds. Smith appeared before the U.S. District Judge Catherine. You know what I mean? Smith previously admitted to his participation in a drug trafficking organization engaged in multi-kilogram shipments of cocaine and marijuana from Los Angeles, California, and Florida. You know what I'm saying? This is one of the first big things they said that happened out here. I'm thinking that this guy right here, I think is the one that had the Colombian connect. You know what I'm saying? He had a straight Colombian source, not a Mexican source, Colombian connect, homie. You know what I'm saying? And he's saying like this guy, where he was out there, he kind of blew it up and got St. Louis on the map a lot, you know what I'm saying? Even before, you know what I'm saying, Meech and him, because he had went down at the time. It's crazy how they was trying to break it down, though. But not only that, it led me down to different roads. It led me down this road, Brandon Adams. You know what I mean? When we go into the Brandon Adams, was all cases that stemmed from us living in Big Meech. Then we going into St. Louis. As you can see, a lot of things I'm doing is in the Eastern District. You know what I'm saying? Because we got people online saying that this one snitch, Meech snitch, Cuffy snitch, and all that. I get it. We know Tammy Cowens. We know Keith Cromer. We know Agent Keith Cromer. We know Jack Harvey. We know, you know what I mean, the certain main characters in this thing. But yet, it's still other people that's in this thing. I done went through the paperwork, read to all three of Cuffy Gatlin's co-defendants. Like I said, got OIG reports. Cuffy, Tammy, and Keith's illustrious affair that they was having for 8 to 12 months. You know what I'm saying? She driving his official government vehicles and all that. You know what I mean? It's crazy. So she driving the V's and all that. He bugging, nah, what happened? Nah, Keith, tell the truth, bro. She was driving the cars and all that. You know what I mean? So we are going to be getting to a lot of that too. You know what I mean? So, you know what I mean? When we get into it, it's just real stuff. But as well as we getting into that, I will be getting into this as well, because as you see, Brandon Adams was the header on this case. So it's not like I'm just throwing cases at you. Yo, here goes this guy named Brandon Adams. Hey, and just throw a case at you. Nah, I put him in there for what reason? Look at the name that's in here right here. Anthony Gatlin, see it there? But you see Deron Gatlin, RIP, that's Cuffy's brother. You know what I'm saying? So you know, and they was all close. Wani, Magic, RP to Magic, you know what I'm saying? You know, and he was close with Meech, Terry, and all of them, you know what I mean? So, you know what I mean? But we also, besides Deron Gatlin, RIP to Magic Wani, we also have, if you go down 1 name, 2 name, 3 names, right? You got Lamar Gayfield. That's a wild name, Lamar Gayfield. I know they was joking on you when you was a kid, but you turned out to probably be a gangster, you in this conspiracy paper. But chill, Lamar, chill. You know what I mean? Look, Terrell Herndon, and then this guy right here, Theodis Howard. Theo, you know, Theo, he was unalived in a conspiracy with Cuffy Gatlin, and they say that Cuffy Gatlin ended up pleading guilty to all these things anyway, but he was unalived because he was supposed to be an informant and was telling on Cuffy's brother, Deron Gatlin, RIP Magic Wani, and then Terrence Morgan also was unalived. There was another guy that was around them working with them and shit. Another guy, he was unalived in the alley in St. Louis, you know what I'm saying? They told him, you know what I mean? He was stepped out to take a piss in the alley, and he told Andre Rush who was Cuffy. Told Andre Rush, allegedly, but this is what he pled guilty to. He told Andre Rush to go take care of him or something real quick, you know what I'm saying? And he walked out and just put 2 in his shit, bang, bang, right there in the alleyway, you know what I'm saying? Andre Rush ended up coming out confessing about all of it, his part, saying sorry in the court for other things that he did, his wrongs. He got hit with 25 years, which ultimately, in turn, led Cuffy Gatlin saying that, yo, basically, I had to plead guilty, too, because they had me this way, that way, and every other way, and they was trying to charge me with the bodies and all this other stuff, you know what I'm saying? So he ended up copping out to two weapons possessions, which was a 924J and a 924C, which was both collapsed into 1 count, which he got 17 years for that, and he got 10 years for the drug conspiracy, so Cuffy Gatlin got 27 years, you know what I mean? And I did a video on this guy, Theodis Howard, you know what I'm saying, just to see what happened. They showed that he was unalive, headed to a clinic like 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and they said that there was a car that pulled up, Cuffy Gatlin, this is alleged, but this is what they pled guilty to. Cuffy Gatlin was in a waiting car. They pulled up. Andre Rush pointed him out. The guy Theo was with his little sister, his sister or so, and maybe some other family members. He was pointed out. Andre Rush and them said that they positioned the car in a way that Cuffy could see the whole unaliving when it happened. They say 3 people jumped out on him. Boom. Allegedly, the people that jumped out on him was Andre Rush and Raymond Rambo Jones and Derek Bub Clemens. Derek Bub Clemens and Raymond Rambo Jones and Dre. So Dre, Bubs, and Rambo is the ones who allegedly unalive this guy that's on the paper right here for allegedly telling on his brother that's 2 names ahead of him, Deron Gatlin. You feel me? You feel me? So it's real. This whole situation is real. It's real. You know what I mean? RIP to anybody that's alive, because, you know, people got family. Condolences to everybody. You know what I'm saying? But I don't know, man. You know what I mean? They saying that this person's a rat. You know, we don't like rats here. We don't really like rats. But, you know, condolences to the family always, man, because everybody got, you know what I mean? Family, and you know how it goes, man. So salute to that. Yeah, man. So it's gonna be a lot. It's a lot of casework. It's a lot of paperwork, reads. It's a lot. It's gonna be a lot. Yeah, man. This is what we doing. Let's get back to some of this. This is how we doing it.
He eventually does. The charges get dropped. That's when he has that damn birthday / welcome home party with all the animals in the street.
Meech of the Jungle,
that you were
right?
talking about, Meech of the Jungle. Then there's also the shooting that we referenced earlier, and I wanted to circle back to that because the person that took out Ulysses, what was his name?
Ulysses Hackett.
Ulysses Hackett, and then what was it?
Misty Carter.
Misty Carter. That guy's name was Tremaine Graham. He's kin to the mayor of Atlanta.
He was, yeah. He was the son-in-law, married to her daughter.
Nuts. Everybody drop a like, subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed. Drop a like now. Everybody hit the poll as well. You already know we got a lot of different things to get into. Yeah, man, I ain't gonna let no cats out the bag, but we got a lot of good content that's on the way that, trust me, you want to be involved in, you want to see. Trust. So subscribe to the channel. Make sure you got the notification bells on.
Yeah. What kind of dynamics did that bring up?
So the night of the murder, when they are murdered, a call goes out to APD, to the headquarters, inquiring about any information they may have about a murder in this area at that location. This is before homicide was ever we call the Hat Squad. Mark Cooper, who was a great homicide detective, before he was even assigned, before APD was even